Hey, man, this is it. Welcome, welcome. Hey, everybody, this is the inaugural episode of the BetterMen Project podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Farrah, and I have my co-host with me today, Coach Colin Stevens.
What's up? What's up?
Coach? Say a little hi to everybody there at home. So guys, this is the first episode. We wanted to kind of reach out to you guys, meet you where you're at. We think there's a lot of guys out there that are approaching this socio-political climate of the world. We've noticed, the rise of Jordan Peterson, the rise of Joe Rogan, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I love those guys and podcasts that are men focused at a time when, for whatever reason, and the reasons don't matter for this podcast today or anything, but it just seems like men in general, we've noticed this in our lives. Both of us have gone through struggles. Some of that's detailed, by the way, guys, in Colin's excellent book that just recently dropped, Make Your Mark. Fantastic. Yes, awesome book. We ended up getting a couple copies. Fantastic. But men seem a little bit directionless, a little bit lost. We want to make our mark, all of us, men and women in the world. And so there's a part of that, too, specific to men. Commensurate or, at the same time as that, I think we're facing questions of how do we stay healthy in a world that doesn't necessarily promote health.
Yeah.
And it makes it hard to define and understand what is health because there's many aspects to that: physical, emotional, psychological. So, I read the book, Make Your Mark, just to be honest. And yeah, we are plugging the book. It's a fantastic book. So I will shamelessly plug that because I'm not the author, but this guy is fantastic. He did something great. It moved me. It literally moved me. I didn't know Colin real well. I knew of him. He's a fixture in Myrtle Beach where we live. Been here a long time. Former D1 college basketball athlete, former semi-pro basketball athlete, and runs the Manzer Academy. If I got that wrong, let me know. But and that's all I really knew of him. Read the book, and on a whim, with much fear and trepidation, thinking, what is this guy going to think of me? I said, hey, man, can we meet for lunch and talk? I want to talk to him about his book. I want to talk about what he's going through. I was going through some things in my life that resonated with me, and he was very transparent in his book. Check it out. And talked about his desire to make his mark in this world and encouraging us to do the same along with him. It resonated with me. Sat down, had lunch, and almost a year later, here we are, the first podcast.
Right.
Coach, tell everybody hi at home.
What do you think? Am
I spot on there? Or
yeah, man. Close? No, this is kind of like the origins, right, of the BetterMen Project and us kind of teaming up on what, some of the stuff that we're going through, right? We've had our experiences as men, and certainly this is the BetterMen Project, but it's not just for men. Hopefully we're also helping some women understand men better. And but really the premise is just because we know there's a lot of confusion, right, on what a good man is, what a man should be, how can we be better at what we're doing as husbands and fathers and businessmen and entrepreneurs and all of the above. So we are taking time to break down a bunch of issues that guys deal with, and our whole intent is to help. I think when you talked about reaching out and us having lunch that time, it was like, I think we share some common visions on what we want to do in terms of figuring life out for ourselves, but also bringing some men along with us to do that.
Yeah, and the cool thing was, guys, that Colin had this concept that resonated with me, and I just want to expound on it real quick and then get your opinion of that. But he said to him, and I believe this wholeheartedly, healthier, I just don't want to take credit for it because healthier men equals a better world. And to be really crystal clear too, not only is that true, but that does not mean when we focus on one thing, we're not excluding the rest of the population, the rest of the world. We're saying as men, and what we in our lives as we've experienced it, that's what we can speak to the best because that's what we live every day. But importantly, as we conceive of it, a better man is an inclusive man, and we're gonna you're gonna bring along every other group of people along with you, because you're gonna be developing yourself first and foremost, and being the best leader, teammate, husband, coworker, what have you. We're just speaking from what we know, and speaking from the heart. Do I have that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we think about it in our lives, like when we are operating in a better way, when we are confident, when we are compassionate, when we are loving, when we are strong, when we are operating as those type of men, we are better for our families.
Right.
We are better for our workplaces. We're better for just altogether our communities and thus the world.
Right.
And so if we can continue to better ourselves and help men become stronger and healthier and more loving and more understanding,
right,
then our world gets better.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that's where our focus is. And it's interesting, because we've had some of these retreats, and today is all about why are we doing the BetterMen Project. And so we've polled a bunch of guys, and I'm just going to go through 12 different reasons that guys have said they're interested in what we offer in terms of becoming a better man. Why is this like something that interests them? All right. One of them is they're tired of faking it.
Oh my gosh.
2, they're searching for purpose. 3, doing something for myself without feeling guilty. 4, this guy was a new father and needed some direction in that regard. 5, a reminder that I'm not alone. 6, the cancel culture, right? If we say something wrong, then we're just going to be canceled or cut out. What was I on 6?
Am I on cancel culture?
Maybe 7. 7 is defining what a good man is. 8, wanting support and connection. 9, pressure not to fail. 10 is not having a sense of a locker room. We'll definitely dive into that more. 11 would be the idea that men understanding their emotions is in some way soft. And then number 12 is difficulty in leading. So these are not all-encompassing, but reasons that guys have said that this is why they are plugged in to the BetterMen Project, and they want to get better. And so when we look at all those things, I mean...
Well, I don't know. What do you think? Should we unpack that?
For sure. Like, okay, so I relayed that list to you. Which one of those jumps out at you and says...
Yes.
Yeah.
They all. I mean,
yeah.
God, man, these are the things. You've got, you're a dad, I'm a dad. We've got we both have kids. We just had our fourth, really, and I'm a brand new father to 9-month-old Finley Kate. So let's check that box. This is interesting. This is something for myself.
Yeah,
guys. And I don't mean it as in a badge of honor or we're heroic or we're so selfless, but I mean it probably from ignorance, if I'm speaking for myself.
Sure.
And I never thought to take time for myself to fulfill those things that I need to be a better man on a daily basis, or even shorter time frame than that. And I mean like self-care.
Yeah.
I guess if you would have told me when I was younger, I would have been like, that's for women.
Well, yeah, but then
that's for.
So when you think about self-care and a dude, what I think about is guys playing video games.
Yeah.
Right. Just doing whatever you want to do.
Might be
right.
In some way,
sure.
Yeah.
But just doing whatever you want to do, or just focusing on yourself and lavishly doting on yourself is different than self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care, taking care of the self, means that you give yourself what you actually need.
Right.
And I think a lot of guys are tuned out of what they actually need.
Well, you know why? Because to know what you need, you have to understand what you need.
Yeah.
You have to be focused on what you need, and you have to differentiate that from what you want.
Yes.
That's fascinating, Cole. I've never done that as a man until probably recently. And just to jump back to something you said about what you thought and lavishly spending time, or kind of maybe just kind of puttering around, wasting time with video games, or just doing things that were self-centered, really.
Yeah.
Is that your definition, or is that what you found other men have defined it as? Because that was a little bit different than what I was thinking.
Sure. And I don't think that I have the 100% correct definition of what self-care is.
It's different for everybody.
Sure. But, and because we need different things in different moments.
Right. That's
right.
True.
And so I think a lot of times men are in the dark about what they actually need.
Oh, absolutely.
And so some of these things that have come up are connection, or, support. And a lot of times as guys, we don't want to tell people we want to be connected to somebody. Right. We just want to actually make it happen. Sometimes we feel like we're connected if we are playing Call of Duty with a bunch of other dudes. Like maybe that's the best way that we can connect. Honestly.
Yeah, and that may be a way of connecting for sure.
Or some of us connect through playing golf together, or going to the bar and having some drinks and hanging out. Like there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I think identifying what is it that I actually need, and which, to be able to identify what we need, you're right, you need to be self-aware and focused on what's going on internally.
Right.
We have to be tuned in with our emotions. We have to understand who we are, so that we can therefore care for ourselves in a way that makes us better for our families and for the people that we influence.
And I think it's so cool. This is why I love the podcast medium, is that people are having these tough conversations on a more public forum that's both public but yet intimate. Like, public in the sense that it's out there on the internet. This is going out there on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. This is going to be on IG, all the major social media platforms and everything. But it's very intimate. We're in the studio talking, and we're sharing with you. We're pulling back the curtain and letting you see inside. And I think that's really cool. In traditional media, I don't think you found that too much. It was all scripted. It is still scripted.
Sure.
The nightly news and different things, and they try to make it more intimate. Good Morning America, or these weekend shows, or different. And nothing against that show or any traditional media. I'm not in that world, and I'm not. That's important. I'm not saying it's not, but you just didn't get the intimate sense, and you didn't have these topics broken down. And I think that's important because, for instance, as we're here talking and sharing, and I'll ask this to you, but I'll say about myself, I don't know that my dad ever knew that he needed that.
Yeah.
But as the formative figure growing up for me as a man, to teach me how to be a man, and I know that changes as you age, but the first and foremost, you think of a father figure, or your biological father. I doubt he even knew to even say anything, but he never said, "Hey, by the way, son, realize that you're going to need connection to other guys and other people in general, and that sense of community is really important for your health, your well-being, your psychological and emotional health, and here's how to do it."
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, when you're playing video games with friends, or a pickup game of basketball, your oxytocin is releasing, and you're building bonds, and you're satisfying that portion of your soul and your mentality and your psychological aspects that you need to thrive. Did you?
No.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, no. I mean, like, and part of that is the development of science and the studies and the research that
Absolutely.
are showing how much more healthy and effective this is in terms of the psychological health of men,
right?
And our connectedness, and so we understand more of that, but maybe it's also because we want to understand more of it.
Right.
I think
that's true.
Right. So like, so much of this has come out of a struggle for me to really actually, the whole premise of growing in Better Men is for the inside to match the outside.
Right.
The whole faking it part that
I was just about to say, that comes back up to the faking it part.
Is like, so many times we feel like we've got to be somebody else for the approval of others, for the acceptance of others, and so we alter who we actually are so that we get approval from others.
Right.
And if we get really good at altering ourselves for the approval of others, we'll just keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that, and we will not have any sense of self.
Right. But it's a temporary hit of it's a temporary ease to that pain of, because you're not so the faking thing is interesting because we totally do it. I've done it, still struggle with it. I guess like anybody would, like, hopefully less and less every day. That's the goal. But but sometimes I think, and I wonder if what you think about this is maybe sometimes we're faking it because we don't know any better. I didn't know that I needed XYZ.
Sure.
So I'm going to just say I'm okay. And I'm faking, not so much that because I want your approval, although I do, but I don't even know what to tell you because I don't even know that I'm missing something that I need.
Yes.
So it's an understanding too. Absolutely. On the other hand, though, I remember being in college. I wanted to be the guy that was buying people drinks at the bar and had the this or had the that, or was seen as this or seen as that. And those temporary dopamine hits of approval were probably a Band-Aid for not developing myself as a man.
Sure.
And not finding out what I needed and focusing on generating that in my life.
Yeah. And it's a comfort with self, right? It's a comfortability with who we are. We're afraid that we're not going to be accepted. Absolutely. So then we alter who we are.
Right.
And we try to present something different that we think will be accepted.
But that's uncomfortable.
Absolutely. For sure. Either way is uncomfortable.
Right.
But I think what we find that there's a lot of frustration within men when we alter ourselves. We might alter ourselves so a girl likes us. We might alter ourselves so we get a certain job. We might alter however so that we can present this picture. But in actuality, when we alter ourselves and then we are not accepted, I think that jacks us up as men.
Oh my gosh.
Because we do so much effort that nobody sees. We're probably not even aware of it, really.
Right.
And we do so much effort and then it's rejected and it's like, oh my gosh.
Well, you have nothing to fall back on because you never developed it in the first place. You never had a foundation.
And so what we want to get to is this sense of self and this acceptance of self.
Right.
Because there's only one of us. We're trying to be like everybody else, who we think is cool, who we think is hip and is getting a lot of attention or is rich or whatever we think of as like, oh, that's who we want to be. But if we don't accept ourselves, we're not actually being who we are. We're trying to be like everybody else.
Right. And so one of the things that resonates with me on that level is that I don't care what anybody says. And I'm going on a limb here because I hope you agree. But I think there are constants and there are fundamentals in terms of thematic issues or struggles or like the sense of purpose. And you see that like on the PBD podcast and the Joe Rogan podcast and all Chris Willick's podcast, all these different avenues, Jordan Peterson and today I see it in my, I have a 17-year-old all the way down to a 9-month-old with a 8-year-old and a 7-year-old in between. And I think about young people growing up. I think about myself growing up. And this is part of the reason, as a man, everybody's an individual and everybody's different. And I don't want to ever suppress anybody's individualism or sense of identity in that. But there just is certain things that thematically, at least, these bigger themes and modes and that we need to understand and accept as human beings about being a man, sense of purpose, men need a mission, these types of things. Now they can all be different. They can be, but in these ways of reaching fulfillment. If that's always changing, like I see, and it's not that it's never been like that before and back in my day. It's just that I'm at the age where I guess I'm looking at it more, and I can have the lens of time to look back through a little bit now at age 47. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, if everything is fluid and everything just changes every day, how do you ever get grounded and have some kind of representation to fall back on? And like you said, if you create this life and out of fluidity, out of faking it, or all these different things, and then you never have that constant to fall back on, it's even more, it totally wrecks you.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you found that in your life. Do you
No,
see
for
the same
sure.
thing?
And I mean, it's with a lot of the people that I coach and start initially coaching, it's trying to get to an identity of who they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all need a foundation. We need a stable foundation. And so if that who we want to be is always a moving target based upon the people we're around, or based upon our environment, or based upon this or that, and it's always moving, then we're not going to have enough of a sense of self that actually makes us feel calm and safe and secure.
Right. And right there, what you just said. So that's really interesting in your coaching practice, getting people to find out, who are you really? Who are you? What do you stand for? What defines you? And then you just talked about, and this is one of the things I find so fascinating, and a lot of my recent research has been focused on, is that fear. You talked about, use the word calm and safe. And to me, that resonates with that fear of change, because so many people are living lives where they're faking it, where they might not have purpose. They might not be doing things for themselves, but there is a massive fear, and understandably so.
Yeah.
I mean, you find yourself 30, 40 years down the road with children and a wife, depending on you, a family, and you have to make money. And now you're confronted with, oh, I'm working down at I'm an investment banker, but maybe I was always supposed to be, or, my heart, my passion, my skill set really is not in that. I'm good enough to do this, and I'm making good money, but I'm really good at selling real estate, or whatever it is, and now I'm confronted with that, and I want to do that. Boy, you talk about a mountain of fear.
Yes.
Do you find with your coaching practice that once you define who somebody is, to get there, do you find that in between there and where they're at is a massive wall of fear?
Absolutely. Fear, I think, is the thing that holds us all back the most. And so regardless of whether we're chasing after something or making decisions on a day-to-day basis, if fear is what's driving us, we're going to stay stuck or go backwards.
Right.
Because and so fear to me is a big reason that we make certain decisions.
Yes.
Right. It's a reason that instead of investing your money, you just leave it in your savings account that gives you hardly anything. Right. That's driven by fear. When we choose a partner or a mate, is it somebody that do we fear being challenged for growth, or do we choose somebody who's safe and makes us feel safe?
We fear being alone, so we settle.
Right,
quote unquote,
right. And so you just try to get with anybody, and and try and make it work, or maybe in an abusive relationship,
right,
and you don't leave because you fear being alone. So I think fear is the thing that jacks us up the most altogether. As people, men and women, young and old, I think fear is the thing that holds us back the most.
Yeah.
And addressing how we approach fear is what can promote the best change.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm speaking from this is from experience, is from research, is from, but more so because I've been on the other side of it, and I'm working towards conquering fear, approaching it in a different way.
And if you ever thought that he was not telling the truth, which he'll never do, but if you ever thought, go pick up Make Your Mark and read about the struggle in the entrepreneurial struggle in his life. And for anybody that's considering being an entrepreneur or is an entrepreneur, that will resonate with you mightily, because it's tough. And if you don't get to have a business for 15 years, like Manzer's been around, without having to address that and overcome that. And right, I mean, I don't. I know specifically from the book, I know some examples, but I don't. But outside of that, I don't know. I've never asked you, but I would imagine it's just insane.
I mean, so it was. I have my book launch, and somebody asked
that alone,
right?
Yeah.
So, somebody asked me, right? Because all of this stuff can flop.
Yeah, exactly,
right? Like I mean, when you're putting yourself out there, all this stuff can flop. Like, we can put out this podcast and we can have it.
The cool thing was that you were Colin. You just, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
To me, it seemed like when I read the book and when I knew of you, it was like, okay, this guy decided who he was. This is this is the change. And you also talk about organized religion and all some of the things. in your life that were maybe you were faking it, or maybe you just weren't being true to yourself. You said, no matter what, I'm gonna be true to myself. I'm gonna write this book. This is for everybody. This is for me too. And so you had already won, and I think we forget that sometimes.
Yes, I think
completing a task when you're being true to yourself.
Sure, and
like that.
Yes, and I think the reason for the book and the reason for me taking a different path was because fear had dictated too much of my life.
Yeah,
and I finally became aware of it, and I was pissed. Because so many times we think that we give so much power to the outside world as though it's our teachers who give us the grades. It's our parents who are dictating this stuff. It's our coaches who dictate our playing time. It's somebody else is pulling the strings in our life. Well, if we finally take ownership that, no, we are giving somebody else power. If we're saying that, we're giving somebody else power. Whoever we're blaming, we're giving power to. And so I, grew up in the Christian church, and there was a lot of dogma and a lot of belief systems that were, instilled in me. A lot of them good, but plenty of them fear-based.
Right.
And so I didn't realize,
and human-based.
Yeah, sure. And I didn't realize that I had big visions and big dreams of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to impact this world.
Right.
And I was falling short of that. And I didn't realize why. And so much when I actually dug and I got real with myself, it was like, oh, I'm afraid of what other people are going to think of me.
What was the catalyst for that? Because this is I want to stay on this topic for just a second, because I'm glad we got here. I didn't know we were going to necessarily get here today, but and hey, we're going to talk his book a little bit, but there's a lot to unpack here. And guys, seriously, you got to hear. I know some of it, but the way you approach this with such resolve, you got angry, and to me, it sounds like in your mind it was as if, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. I'm not going to tolerate being put in a box. I'm not going to be tolerated and told what to do. I'm not going to tolerate. I'm reading the Bible, one thing, for instance, and I'm being told something else that's a human-based thing, not a God, Jesus Christ. It depends on your view of religion, but we're talking about Christianity and Judeo-Christian values in this specific example. But so I'm not going to tolerate this in my life anymore. I had a brush with death, with COVID. I'm not going to tolerate being unfit anymore.
That's where it hit.
Is that where? Okay.
Yeah. So when I got COVID,
but is that right? Did you say to yourself, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore? I'm not going to tolerate being in this position.
but I'm not going to tolerate it from me.
Right. That's right. Like you were angry. You got angry with yourself, maybe.
Yes. Well, I got real with myself when I was sick with COVID, and when I was wearing a mask in my house, and I went downstairs, and my daughter she's sitting in the hallway, up against the wall, and she's crying.
Oh my!
And I'm like, what's going on?
Oh my gosh! See, I didn't hear that.
And she's like, Daddy, are you gonna die?
Oh yeah.
And I was like, well, shit, I didn't think I was going to, but I that didn't cross my mind at all. But I don't know. I mean, I think I'm gonna be okay, but this thing is rocking me in a way that I didn't think it was going to. And so it was shortly after that I went to the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and I was like, dude, if this was it, would you have lived the life you wanted to live? Would you be proud of the life that you lived? And the answer was no. It wasn't even a long pause, dramatic for with some music and all the kind. No, it was just no. It
was that
quick. And then it was okay, so why not?
Right.
And when I looked at why not, was
that a bitter pill to swallow?
It was, yes, but it was also refreshing. Because it's when you hit rock bottom, you don't have anything else to lose. And I'm not going to say that I was at rock bottom, but I was searching enough, and I was deep enough in a health hole, right? So it doesn't matter. Health has become health is wealth to me, right? I mean, if you have everything else, but you don't have your health, you really don't have anything.
And a lot of people trade wealth for health, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I got to this point, and I was like, well, damn, what's the point of me living a half-ass life?
Right.
Or living out of fear of what other people are going to think of me. That's not what I would have signed up for. That's certainly not what I want my kids to do.
Right.
So if I'm going to want my kids to live a life that they're proud of, I got to do it first.
Right. Right.
And so then came the book, and it was like, okay, there are so many things that I've held back in terms of my beliefs because of the religion that I've been a part of.
Right.
There's a lot of ways that I have not lived or reached out or exposed the truth of what I believe because of fear of being judged.
Right.
And I don't know how well you know the Christian church, but if you don't line up with them or what they believe, and particular institutions, like
Right.
a lot of them will just, cast you to the side.
Yeah.
And I feared that. And then so when it got to the point where I was like, oh no. This is what I actually believe. And I've done plenty of research and studying the Bible. I know, I feel like I know God pretty well.
Right.
I don't feel like this dishonors God. I'm gonna rock with this.
Right.
Like I'm gonna be who I am.
Right.
And so what you were talking about, I'm not tolerating this anymore. It was really me not tolerating living in fear.
Right. That's what
right.
I mean. And so this is interesting. You had that defining moment, but leading up to that moment, had there been a subtle nagging or something gnawing at you?
Yes.
Had it been, how long had that been, you think?
I mean, maybe 7 or 8 years.
Wow.
Of just like the inside not matching the outside, and I knew it. I knew it, but I couldn't express it.
Right.
It's like somebody that knows how to say something but can't read it.
Right.
Like I couldn't read it. Like I kind of knew what was going on, but I there was not enough. I had to get pushed to the edge, and there were some things that happened. I had become in leadership of a deacon in the church that I was with, and I was speaking up about some of the things that I thought could be done differently, and that was very quickly shot down. It was very like, hey, if you don't fall in line with what I say or think or do, then this is not acceptable. And I'm like, a
lot of places.
Sure, and it happens in a lot of institutions, right? And so then I was like, oh, okay, well, that's what I thought would happen here. So let me remove myself here. And then, so much of what was also passed down to me from my parents, I had to start digging in and being like, okay, what were their beliefs here? And how many of these are my beliefs or their beliefs? Like, have I actually established my beliefs separate from my parents?
Right.
Whether it's religious, whether it's financial, whether it's relational, or so as I was establishing those things, it was like, okay, I need to find out exactly who I am, and then I need to rock with that. And if it's not good enough for some people, who I wanted to be good enough for is my wife and my kids.
Right.
Everybody else, they're going to have to figure it out if they don't like me.
One of the things that really strikes me as defining when I think about that COVID moment, you looking yourself in the mirror after talking to Hattie, where she's sitting in the wall against the wall crying, is I keep going back to this thing about being angry. And I'm sorry, I know I'm getting stuck on this, but it's just so cool. The transformation that you went through. And you talked about being angry and you were pissed. And you weren't going to, in my mind, I'm defining it as you weren't going to tolerate yourself being like that anymore. You weren't going to tolerate conducting yourself that anymore. You weren't going to tolerate being held back by those limiting beliefs or those constructs. Do you have any sense, and we can quickly move on if this doesn't go anywhere, of course, but I'm just wondering, like, if you had gotten angrier earlier, I'm wondering what it takes. Do you have a sense of what it took to get you that angry? Because the reason I think about this, let me give you it's a little bit of a leading question. There's a speaker named Miles, or a preacher, I guess. He's a Bahamian. He's deceased now, but he has a lot of good content, motivational content on YouTube and on social media outlets and the web. Miles Monroe, and he talks about that becoming angry, and he talks about breaking a toleration, and it resonates with me, and I find that I see a lot of people go through common themes like this. Do you have any sense of why you weren't angry before, or as angry?
No, I think I was angry, but I think in the prison that I was in internally, I wasn't allowed to be angry.
Wow.
Anger was an emotion that was not accepted within the church, it's not accepted. It was not accepted really for me growing up.
Wow.
Anger is not. It was not a good thing.
Wow.
Because if God is good, how can you be angry?
Yeah.
If you really believe, if you really have faith, then why are you angry?
Wow.
And so and that was certainly, there are other emotions that go along with that I had suppressed and just said, well, no, these can't even be good or true or whatever.
That's insane.
So it wasn't that I wasn't angry before. It was finally I had the light bulb turned on that I was willing to accept being angry.
Wow.
And then I could do something with it.
And that's, you know what, that is huge. And I have never asked you about that ever. And we've never, this is why we do these podcasts. And let me tell you why that's huge. Because I went through a very similar experience. I felt like I could never be angry growing up in the church as well, because a human or somehow my human interpretation of what other humans were telling me, whatever. I don't know that anybody was out in some kind of vendetta or agenda to like make sure I was never angry. I don't mean like that. I'm not trying to blame other people, but these things do happen. But there's a great example, and again, I'm not a biblical scholar, but of Jesus Christ becoming angry with the money changers and the Pharisees, or I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but collecting taxes or something in the temple, and literally it turned to a physical altercation. So see where we have this human construct. You can't be angry. You have to be demure. And Jesus Christ himself didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Another instance is I never felt like I could challenge God, and that wasn't wrong. It was wrong to ask God why. And there was different periods in my life where I went through things, but I remember finishing up fellowship and I had this experience, and I was finishing up surgical fellowship and was really struggling with my religion, my Christianity, myself, my beliefs of the world. And I didn't come to any profound conclusion, but except to say that I read somewhere about, unfortunately, I don't know the person or the Bible verse, but there's an example in the Bible where a figure wrestles with God, like literally wrestles with God.
Jacob.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
And and I remember hearing somebody saying it's okay to do that. This was, and they gave that example, and I said, okay. I felt like I had permission, that's out of the scripture, and okay. And I remember challenging God and saying, if you are real, or if this, and I don't think you're real, or I'm having trouble with this, and just being totally honest. And I remember it was kind of bizarre, but for whatever reason, the next thing I did was getting ready for something. I got into the shower, and then all of a sudden something just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I just started crying. It became so emotional because that moment where, I left those presumed that it was a prison of my own creating, that I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that because because some human had told me or my human interpretation. And just the fact and I felt like there was a small answer back, and maybe we'll explore that on another show. It's not for here and now, but it was just that moment in time. And I didn't get much more than that beyond that, but to be able to challenge God and to be able to communicate with God, as it were, and to challenge the narrative. It was like, that's okay to do, and to find out who you are, and in so doing, find out who you are and be okay with those tough questions. It is an amazing, profound.
It's a release.
It's a release,
right? Because you've been suppressing it for so long, and then finally you get like an answer that allows you to have a release, and that's where the tears flow. Yeah, and tears, fellas. For all of you out there that think crying is soft or it's for girls or it's what, man, it is a very natural human biological action that comes. It's from the inside out. It's like it is very healthy, and if you're crying every day, there's probably something that we need to work on. But crying is absolutely a healthy thing. I know a lot of guys grow up and, They're told just not to cry. Like it's bad. Don't let anybody see you cry. Well,
Right.
okay, maybe figure that out. But the release is huge.
Right.
Like, because if we don't get to the root of one of the things that's holding us back, then we'll never progress. And
it was, and I'll just to expand on it just a little bit more. It was, I was struggling with my own morality and the way I was conducting myself in the world, specifically as it was to deal with relationships with the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And I was struggling to conduct myself in a manner which, again, here you're told, well, I think growing up you can fall into this trap as a guy, and maybe as a girl too, but I don't know. I can't speak to that. But as a guy that, if I'm dating chicks or hooking up and doing this from girl to girl and whatever, that's more of a man, not realizing that, again, that's false information is going to actually imprison you, and it actually just it destroys you mentally, destroys you.
Well, it's so interesting where we get those narratives. Maybe we saw it on a movie.
Yeah.
Maybe we have an older brother who has acted like that and told us that that's how we ought to be, or maybe it was our dad and we just followed in his footsteps. We're all following this narrative somehow that gets placed in our mind internally. We're following this program, and we don't realize until somebody shakes us up that we get to write our own program.
Right.
And once we figure out that this life is ours to actually create, like life ahead of us is ours to write, the story is ours to write, then we feel powerless.
Right.
We feel lost. We feel alone. We feel all these things, and the reason that we're doing this podcast and everything else that we're doing together. And so we have to have that moment that goes, that for me, it was looking in the mirror. For you, it was wrestling with God. For it's hey, what's the moment that I'm actually pissed off enough? I've come to this realization that I need to change. I need to change, not my outside, not the environment, not the people, not all the stuff.
That's right.
I need to.
That
make
narrative
change.
Needs to change.
Yes, and I need to accept responsibility for rewriting the program.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And we can't do that if we don't have an idea who we want to be, who we actually want to be, not who everybody else wants us to be.
And I think too, you come to those consistent, solid, thematic attributes that are timeless. For instance, I don't know that I can't think of a person in history. I can't think of a person I know, a man I know, or anybody in the public life. I don't see anywhere. And again, when I was a teenager, I thought, hey, the more chicks you score, the more chicks you bag, the cooler you are, the better. It wasn't cool to be monogamous. It wasn't cool to be an honorable man and those things. But the number one way to be a ineffectual man, to halt your progress forward and ruin lives, including your own, in the process. One of the best ways to do that is to be promiscuous, etc. One of the best ways to be effectual and to conduct yourself properly in the world and move forward. And behind me, I've got some of the 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Those, and Jocko talks about this, how discipline actually equals freedom. Oh my gosh, it's so true. And I'm not saying be a prude, and I'm not saying you have to marry your high school sweetheart. I'm not saying that at all. Those of you engaging on either or know exactly what I'm talking about. But it was a key fundamental aspect of my development as a man. And I feel, all I can tell you, and I'll tell my sons as they get old enough, is, had Dad done it sooner, Dad would have been that much closer to being further on the road as a man.
Sure.
Had I done it sooner.
Yeah.
It was one of the most important things. And I think, I'm glad I did it before I got married, but
Yeah. And I mean, what you're talking about is, it's, to be honest, it's a coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
It's and the reason that any
Absolutely.
of us are chasing women like that, or we're smoking weed, or we're drinking,
right. It could be anything,
or whatever it is we're using to make ourselves feel better. I think if we don't know why, we'll keep doing it.
Right.
And when we find out why, then we are empowered to make some changes.
Right.
And so that's the self-awareness part. That's the part of doing the work to dig into who we are and why we are acting the way we're acting. And if we never go down that road at all, we can't make any changes. Right. And
and so I agree, and so making those changes is important. I see that in these 12 questions in terms of the BetterMen groups that we have. I know I was faking it. I was struggling with my purpose. Again, not understanding that I do need something for myself to keep myself healthy. Being a new father, oh my gosh, that's a whole episode into itself. I felt alone a lot because and even now just talking and connecting on some basic themes once again, as we've done before, but again, I'm feeling that anew, that connection to here's another guy going through the same things that I'm going through. Whatever it is about that, and whatever neurotransmitters being released, oxytocin, whatever it is, my gosh, there's something powerful in that, I think.
Yeah.
One of the things, just to kind of go back to this list, cancel culture, absolutely. We deal with that all the time. In fact, the very minute we talked about this podcast, and then once again before we started it, the title, the BetterMen Project, I felt internally that anxiety of dealing with that, saying, wait a second, I want to, I desire to, and not in a way that's mean or excluding anybody, but I want to, as a man, I want to know more about being a man, and I want to talk to another man about it, as two people that are uniquely positioned as people who experience that, to talk about it. But I feel like if I do, I'm going to get canceled because I'm excluding people.
Sure.
When in reality, I know from 47 years of living, and we know this, and this is the dangerous thing about cancel culture, is I cannot use logic, or is a danger that the logic and common sense of life and living will be suppressed by some arbitrary need to satisfy some arbitrary social construct of inclusivity that isn't real. It's fake. And when I can't maintain it, it's going to break down. But if I become a better man, and I know that being part of a man is to be inclusive, is to bring in people, is to protect people, is to find that common ground, that's lasting.
Yes. And this whole thing of inclusivity, it's really about seeing people for who they are.
Right.
It's not trying to make everybody the same. I don't think it was supposed to start as trying to make everybody the same.
Right.
I think there's I don't know.
That's what it's become, though.
Sure, the powers that be that
monolithic,
just says, everybody should be the same. In actuality, if everybody's the same, then it's said in one of the movies, one of the Incredibles.
Yeah.
Like, when everybody's special, nobody's special.
That's right.
That's like what the evil guy says.
Yeah.
What do you think about my evil voice?
I like it.
Yeah. So it's kind of it is that, like, yes, we are individuals, and we share similarities, but in actuality, inclusivity means that you see somebody for who they are, and you're willing to include them, but they're still unique and they're different, and differences are good.
Right.
We've gotten to this way that if we talk about differences, then we are supposed to hate each other, and it's gotten so polarized that it's like, no, differences are good. They actually, the differences in me and my wife help my kids have a better upbringing.
Right.
Like, the differences in leadership help for a better policies and laws for who they're guiding. And differences are not bad. Arguments are not bad. It's when we are so emotionally immature that we think we need to go to fighting somebody or canceling them or shaming them or whatever it is because they disagree with us.
Right.
Like, to me, that's wildly soft. Like, if your argument is so based upon, if you don't agree with me, then I'm just going to block you, and I'm going to do all this stuff because I can't
deplatform you.
I can't handle somebody disagreeing with me.
Right.
I mean, I have no strength internally.
Right. That's absolutely true. Right.
So, yeah, I think as we kind of wrap this one up, I think for those of you who are listening, if you're a man, take the time to think about your why. Like, why are you interested in listening to such a podcast? Why are you interested in becoming a better man? What are your driving forces? And then, for women, maybe if you have been tuned in, maybe this is something you want to send to your boyfriend or your husband or your son or your dad. And our goal is to really just help men move forward in a positive way. Healthier men make a better world.
Absolutely. And I think that the small groups, the coaching, the retreats and the events, to take advantage of that, find out the schedule, you're going to be better off. We didn't get to go through all of them, but you could hear them. We did name them out. And if any of that resonated with you, I'm telling you, after a year of working with this guy one-on-one in developing what we want to do together and getting to know him, there is just a mountain of helpful information here, and you're going to be a better man, no pun intended, a better man because of it. And you got to put in the effort, but we're here for you, and let's make a healthier world, guys.
Love it.
All right.
We're
See
out.
you next time.